The world trembles in ways we struggle to name. Storms seem to speak in a deeper register than they once did, vibrating through metal towers and glass windows as if they were trying to remind us of something long forgotten. Cities hum at night with a restless tension that has nothing to do with traffic or electricity, a kind of spiritual static that clings to the air, rising from arguments, frustrations, and quiet fears we don't dare put into words. Even the ground beneath our feet seems to pulse differently, as if an invisible drumbeat hidden under the surface has begun to change tempo. And while most people turn up the volume of their lives to drown it out, others are beginning to notice that this global unease is not merely physical. It feels like a shift in the unseen architecture of reality, as though the world is slowly sliding out of tune. Yet far away from the concrete light and the digital noise, in the vast stretching deserts of the American Southwest, there is another hum, steady, patient, ancient. It lingers in the red dust swept across the mesas. It echoes in the deep stillness between canyon walls at dusk. It murmurs beneath stone temples and forgotten observatories carved by hands that once measured the sky with sacred precision. This older resonance does not rise in volume the way our chaos does. Instead, it waits, repeating the same calm tone it has carried for thousands of years. And among the people who have listened to that tone longer than memory itself, a warning was given. When the world begins to shake with inner dissonance, when humanity forgets the rhythm that sustains creation, a purification will come, not as a punishment, but as a necessary tuning. The Hopi called it the Great Purification, a moment when the world divides according to vibration. To them, existence is not built from stone or soil, but from resonance. Harmony sustains life, and disharmony unravels it. They believed that if humanity drifted far enough from the original song of creation, the world itself would correct its pitch, not through fire and wrath, but through a vibrational sorting, separating what remains coherent from what has fallen into discord. And if that is true, if the foundation of reality is not silent, but resonant, then what exactly are we hearing today? What is this trembling that no scientist can fully explain? What is this sense of acceleration, this pressure behind the veil of ordinary events, as if something is vibrating faster than our minds can follow? Imagine for a moment that the world is indeed a song, one composed long before humans learned to write history. Every mountain a note, every river a cello line, every gust of wind a whispering overtone woven into the greater melody. For thousands of years, that song remained stable, its chords balanced, its rhythm steady. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, human beings began to add their own noise. Not simply the clamor of cities or machinery, but the noise of the heart, anger, greed, fragmentation, forgetfulness. And like static creeping into a recording, those emotional distortions began to accumulate. A song can only absorb so much interference before its coherence breaks down. This, the Hopi said, is the sign of a world nearing its threshold. When elders spoke of the Great Purification, they did not describe explosions or cosmic catastrophes. They described a split in vibration, a moment when individuals and societies would find themselves resonating at different frequencies, some rising toward harmony, others sinking deeper into confusion and disconnection. The split would not be visible at first. It would be felt. It would emerge in the way people breathe, react, choose, fear, hope. It would appear in the widening gap between those who seek meaning and those who chase noise. It would manifest in storms and earthquakes of consciousness, in the subtle trembling of a world trying to retune itself. And now, as modern life grows louder and more brittle, we begin to sense exactly what the elders meant. Political fractures that no dialogue can repair, emotional exhaustion that sleep cannot heal, a constant hum of agitation beneath even the quietest days. These are not just cultural symptoms, they are vibrational ones. They reveal a world where the collective frequency has begun to fray, where harmony has been replaced with dissonance so widespread that it feels normal. But if disharmony can build slowly, so too can the remembrance of balance. And this is where the story bends. Because while the modern world shakes with a restless, unfocused tension, the ancient deserts hold a different truth, that humanity has been here before. The Hopi spoke of worlds that rose and fell according to their frequency, worlds that collapsed not from external violence, but from internal imbalance. They believed that we are living now in the fourth world, a temporary refuge built after the last great reset, and that humanity is approaching another crossroads. But unlike popular interpretations, the Hopi did not frame this transition as a doomsday. They framed it as a tuning, a return to coherence. Which leads us to the question that sits quietly behind every storm, every societal fracture, every unexplainable tremor. What if the trembling of our world is not a sign of ending, but the early vibration of something beginning? What if the Great Purification is not the destruction of the planet, but the restoration of its resonance? And if that is the case, then what role do we play in a world that is preparing to realign itself? The Hopi would say the answer lies within the hum beneath everything, the cosmic resonance that still pulses, unchanged through desert winds and starlit nights. It is the tone we have forgotten, yet somehow recognize the moment we grow quiet enough to listen. It is the vibration that calls us back toward harmony, even as the noise of modern life pulls us away. And perhaps the trembling of our age is not an omen of doom, but the first reminder that a tuning is coming, and that we, too, are instruments waiting to be brought back into pitch. Long before telescopes traced the heavens or seismographs recorded the trembling of the ground, the Hopi observed the universe through a different instrument, the inner ear of the spirit. To them, the cosmos was never silent. It was a vast, breathing composition, a woven resonance shaped by forces both seen and unseen. Every rock, every gust of desert wind, every star shimmering against the black dome of night participated in this great symphony. And within it, humanity held a role not as conductor or master, but as one fragile voice among countless others. When that voice fell out of pitch, the entire composition shifted. This idea was not metaphor to the Hopi. It was cosmology. They believed our world was not the first, nor would it be the last. Instead, existence unfolded across a series of worlds, each one born in harmony, each one ending in dissonance. These were the four worlds, and together they formed a cautionary melody about what happens when creation's song collapses under the weight of imbalance. The first world, they said, was simple, peaceful, steady. Its people lived in alignment with what the Hopi call the sacred instructions, the original tuning given by the Creator. Life moved like a gentle chanting, broken, unhurried, unified. But over time, a subtle distortion crept in. It began not in weather or sky, but inside the human heart. People grew careless with their thoughts, their actions, their intentions. They became noisy not in sound, but in spirit. And as their inner disharmony spread, it accumulated like static against the world's natural resonance. Eventually, the first world could no longer sustain the imbalance. The song fractured, the world dissolved. From those remnants, the second world rose. It carried forward the memory of harmony, but memory alone is fragile. Once again, dissonance crept in faster. This time, more confidently. The people drifted from their original vibration, forgetting the laws of balance that once held everything together. When the interference grew too loud, the second world too collapsed. And with each collapse, the lesson deepened. The universe does not destroy out of rage. It resets out of necessity, the way a musician repeats a phrase after hitting a wrong note. By the time the third world emerged, humanity had become clever, industrious, ambitious. They built structures, crafted tools, mastered technologies unfamiliar to earlier ages. The Hopi describe this world as strikingly similar to our own advance, expansive, bursting with pride. But brilliance without balance breeds distortion. The third world grew swollen with ego, competition, separation. People polluted not only land and sky, but the intangible fields of emotion and consciousness. The Hopi say that in those days, humans forgot how to hear the hum of creation, how to sing with the earth, how to move in rhythm with the cosmic architecture that supported them. Imagine an orchestra where each musician decides to play louder, faster, or offbeat. Convinced their individual line matters more than the composition. The result is not music, but noise, and noise cannot sustain life. So again, the cosmic song unraveled. Again, the world reset. This is the pattern, the refrain repeated through Hopi memory. Harmony gives drift, gives dissonance, gives collapse, gives renewal. Each world a verse in an ancient composition. Each collapse not an apocalypse, but a tuning in effort by the universe to bring the melody back into coherence. Which brings us to the world we inhabit now. The fourth, according to Hopi tradition, it is a temporary refuge, a carefully crafted space meant to give humanity one more opportunity to rediscover the original vibration. But a refuge is not a guarantee. A reset is not a reprieve. Even in this world, the patterns of the past press against us, whispering reminders of what happens when the inner noise becomes too loud. And isn't that what we are seeing today? A world technologically brilliant yet spiritually encoded. A species more connected by wires than by compassion. Emotional pollution as widespread as physical pollution. Minds buzzing with constant stimulation. Hearts overwhelmed by unprocessed fear. It is not difficult to recognize the echo of the third world in our current age. But the Hopi would caution us. Echoes are warnings, not destinies. So the question becomes, are we drifting again toward dissonance? Repeating the forgotten mistakes of earlier worlds? Or are we standing at the threshold of remembering the ancient melody that once held everything together? The Hopi never claimed the worlds collapsed because of divine anger. They believed collapse came when the vibrational architecture stressed by human discord could no longer support itself. When the song broke, the stage dissolved. And this is where the story deepens. Because if the four worlds represent a cycle of harmony, lost and found, then humanity is not merely a witness to the cosmic song, we are participants in it. The state of our consciousness influences the stability of the world itself. If we live in harmony, the world resonates. If we fall into dissonance, the world trembles. Perhaps that is why the ancient Hopi placed such emphasis on remembering the sacred instructions, not as dogma, but as tuning guides. The instructions were reminders of how to live in coherence with one another, with the earth, with the unseen rhythms that shape existence. They were invitations to stay in pitch. And yet, humanity drifts. Slowly, subtly, convincingly. But the Hopi taught that even the greatest drift can be corrected once we recognize it. No world collapses without warning. The shaking comes first, the subtle trembling that signals the song is slipping, which leads us back to our time, our storms, our noise, our rising tension. If the world is truly a composition, then perhaps we are hearing the early signs of dissonance. Or perhaps if we listen with a different kind of attention, we are hearing the first hints of a new melody trying to break through the old. A melody that calls us not toward fear, but toward coherence. And if that is true, then the four worlds are not distant myths. They are mirrors held up to the present moment, reflecting the choices we are making, the frequencies we are amplifying, the harmony we are forgetting or rediscovering. The fourth world was never meant to be permanent. In Hopi memory, it is described not as a homeland granted without condition, but as a threshold, a space of restoration, reflection, and recalibration after the collapse of the third world's brilliant but noisy civilization. If the previous worlds taught anything, it was that humanity thrives only when its inner resonance remains aligned with creation's original harmony. Yet here we stand, deep within the age of the fourth world, watching the familiar tremors of imbalance return like a recurring note in a forgotten song. At first, the trembling appears subtle, a strange tension in the collective atmosphere, a heaviness beneath everyday conversation, an exhaustion that sleep does not cure. People sense something is off, though they rarely agree on what it is. Some blame politics, others blame technology, others point to the environment, the economy, or the decline of community. But beneath all these explanations lies a deeper undercurrent, a dissonance not of systems, but of consciousness. Imagine a guitar string tuned ever so slightly out of pitch. To an untrained ear, it still sounds like music, but the longer it plays, the more the surrounding strings strain to compensate, until the entire instrument begins to vibrate in conflict with itself. This, the Hopi would say, is what happens when human beings drift from spiritual coherence. The disharmony begins inside, but eventually it reaches outward, influencing families, societies, even the energetic stability of the planet. As the fourth world matures, signs of this drift appear everywhere. Natural disasters intensify not as punishments, but as physical expressions of imbalance. Social structures fracture along lines of fear, mistrust, and division. People feel unmoored, as if they have lost some invisible anchor. Technology accelerates faster than wisdom. Noise, both literal and emotional, fills the spaces where silence once guided intuition. These symptoms mirror the late days of previous worlds, when humanity forgot the rhythm that sustained them. But the Hopi never warned of chaos, merely to instill fear. Their teachings carry a quieter truth. Imbalance is also a signal. It is the universe reminding us that the song of creation cannot be drowned by static forever. When the static becomes unbearable, the tuning must begin. This tuning is what the Hopi call the Great Purification. Contrary to popular imagination, they did not describe it as a fiery apocalypse. They described it as a vibrational divide, a moment when the world sorts itself by frequency. Those who cling to distortion, fear, ego, and inner noise remain entangled in a lower resonance. Those who choose clarity, humility, unity, and truth rise into alignment with a higher one. It is not a judgment. It is physics of the spirit, and perhaps this explains an emerging phenomenon of our age, not destruction, but separation. People living in the same city, even the same household, begin to perceive reality differently. Some feel increasingly overwhelmed, reactive, hopeless. Others feel a quiet pull toward introspection, healing, and rebalancing. The difference is not circumstance, it is resonance. If you look closely, you can sense this split everywhere. It appears in the contrast between those who consume chaos and those who seek calm. It appears in the growing number of individuals who feel called without knowing why to meditate, simplify, or reconnect with the natural world. It appears in the way many people experience time speeding up, not as a metaphor, but as a palpable shift in inner tempo. These are signs of a world undergoing vibrational sorting. The Hopi elders taught that the fifth world does not simply arrive like a new dawn. It must be entered. It is a state of resonance that not everyone will choose or even recognize. Those who walk in balance will find their way, they said. Those who cling to dissonance will remain behind. And in this teaching lies a profound reinterpretation of prophecy. The Great Purification is not an external event to fear, but an inner turning point, which leads us to a deeper question. What does it mean to be in tune with the world? According to Hopi understanding, alignment is not achieved through belief systems, rituals, or obedience. It is achieved through coherence, the harmonizing of thought, emotion, intention, and action with the subtle laws of nature. A coherent person radiates steadiness. Their presence feels grounded, transparent, unforced. They move through the world as if listening to a rhythm no one else can hear, yet everyone recognizes when they feel it. In contrast, incoherence is not evil. It is simply noise, confusion, fragmentation, emotional turbulence, the rush towards stimuli that overwhelms the senses. When enough individuals fall into incoherence, the world mirrors it. Weather patterns destabilize, social fabric tears, collective anxiety rises, not as punishment, but as resonance. The outer world matches the inner world just as a drumhead vibrates in sympathy with the note sounded near it. And so, the Hopi viewed the Great Purification not as destruction, but as recalibration. The universe striking a tuning note that causes every part of existence to reveal its frequency. What aligns will rise. What resists alignment will stay within the old pattern until it dissolves. This perspective invites a gentler interpretation of our present moment. What if the instability shaking modern civilization is not an omen of doom, but an invitation? What if the fractures appearing across the globe are openings, cracks through which a new resonance is trying to emerge? What if the growing longing for peace, simplicity, and inner stillness is not escapism, but instinct, a natural response to a world preparing to tune itself? And this brings us back to the trembling of the fourth world. The Hopi said that before the transition, the world would speak to us, not in words, but in vibration. Through signs in nature, shifts in consciousness, disruptions in the patterns we once relied on. The shaking would grow louder, not to frighten us, but to draw our attention to the fact that a choice is being offered, one that each person must make individually, regardless of nation, culture, or belief. The fifth world is not guaranteed. It is chosen. It is created through harmony, coherence, and remembrance. It is the melody that waits beneath the static, ready to rise when we tune ourselves to hear it again. And if the trembling intensifies, it may not be because the world is breaking, but because it is preparing to sing. The Hopi spoke of many signs that would precede the Great Purification, but none has captivated the modern imagination more than the Blue Star Kachina. In their teachings, it is described as both an omen and a messenger, something that appears in the sky not merely to be seen, but to be felt. A presence, a signal, a shift. The Hopi said that when this blue star dances in the heavens, the world will enter a period of profound transformation, the kind that reverberates through consciousness itself. But the deeper hope of this teaching is not fear, it is recognition. Because the blue star is less a prophecy of destruction and more a reminder that reality can still be tuned. To understand the blue star, one must step into the symbolic lens through which the Hopi viewed the cosmos. In their ceremonies, the Kachina's masked dancers embodying spiritual forces do not perform in the modern sense. They transmit. Their movements are a choreography of resonance. Their drums and chants, instruments of realignment. When a Kachina dances, the ground beneath observers seems to hum in response, as if some hidden geometry inside the earth and the human spirit shifts into coherence. So when elders say that a Kachina will one day dance in the sky, they are not describing mere spectacle. They are describing a vibrational event, a cosmic tuning. Imagine then the blue star not as a star or comet or supernova, but as a kind of celestial tuning fork, its appearance, striking a note that ripples through the world, shaking what is fragile, clarifying what is true, awakening what has slept for generations. Whether the blue star is literal or symbolic matters less than the effect it is said to have. It resets the pitch of humanity, and this, the narrative bridges seamlessly, is where the mystery deepens. Because when we step from Hopi teachings into the broader tapestry of ancient cultures, something unexpected emerges. Countless civilizations, though separated by oceans, continents, and millennia, seem to have hinted at a similar idea, that a cosmic frequency underlies creation, and woven through their myths, temples, chants, and calendars is a single number that appears again and again like a forgotten refrain. That number is 432. You find it in Vedic traditions, where 432,000 years form a major cosmic cycle. You find it in Norse mythology, which speaks of 432,000 warriors at Rak. You find it in the dimensional proportions of Angkor Wat, Egyptian temples, certain Greek complexes, even in Gregorian chant structures. You find it encoded in malas with 108 beads, each a fractional step in a harmonic sequence leading back to 432. It appears in the diameter of the sun when expressed in certain units in mathematical ratios of sacred geometry. In the tuning preferences of composers like Giuseppe Verdi, who insisted that 432 Hz produced a more natural resonance with the human body. Coincidence? Perhaps. But as the pattern grows, the coincidence becomes less convincing. If 432 is not the frequency of the universe itself, then perhaps it is something subtler, a note of harmony and a vast lattice of mathematical relationships. A point at which sound, geometry, and biology intersect. Much like the golden ratio, 432 seems to rest in a place where nature expresses itself with effortless symmetry, which leads us to the tuning systems of music. Most modern instruments are tuned to 440 Hz as standard, chosen not because it mirrors nature, but because it was convenient for industrial manufacturing and orchestral uniformity. Before this standardization, many cultures gravitated toward pitch systems centered around 432, or its harmonic relatives. Musicians who experiment with both tunings often describe 432 as warmer, rounder, more organicless, like an external tone, and more like something the body already knows. This is not strict scientific proof of anything, but symbolically and mathematically, the pattern is compelling. And patterns, especially those that repeat across cultures and centuries, deserve attention. If the blue star is a cosmic tuning fork, then 432 might be the whisper of its resonance, a clue left behind in architecture, myth, and song, pointing toward a universal principle the ancients understood intuitively. The idea is not that 432 Hz is magical in itself, but that it aligns with a larger harmonic family, the same family that shaped temples, calendars, and rituals around the world. Which brings us to the Earth's own frequency, the Schumann resonance, a steady electromagnetic pulse circling the globe at approximately 7.83 GE. When you raise this frequency by repeated octaves, doubling it again and again, it approaches the audible range, and one of its harmonic steps lands astonishingly close to 432 Hz. No, the numbers do not match with perfect precision. Modern physics urges caution, but symbolically, mathematically, and intuitively, they fall into a resonance that feels intentional, as though the Earth and ancient humanity were both vibrating along the edges of the same cosmic pattern, perceiving different aspects of a single underlying rhythm. And this is where things become even more intriguing. If ancient people built temples tuned to harmonic ratios, if their chants circled around frequencies connected to natural cycles, if their myths encoded numbers that repeat globally, then perhaps they were not simply worshipping gods. They were tuning reality. When the blue star dances, Hopi elders said, the world will hear a sound it has forgotten. Could that sound be symbolic? Could it be mathematical? Could it be the rediscovery of a frequency that reveals how to step into the fifth world, not by force or belief, but by alignment? We return now to the center of the prophecy, the Great Purification as a vibrational split. In that light, the blue star is not a threat, it is a threshold. 432 is not dogma, it is a key. And the ancient world, in its temples and chants and stories, may have left behind a map made not of ink, but of resonance. A map we are only now learning to read. If the Great Purification is truly a vibrational event, if the trembling of the fourth world is the beginning of a cosmic retuning, then the final movement of this story is not written in the sky, nor in ancient myths, nor in the mathematics of 432. It is written inside the human being. Every prophecy, every sign, every sacred number ultimately narrows into the smallest possible space. The quiet interior where thought becomes intention, where emotion becomes frequency, where consciousness becomes resonance. The Hopi never taught that salvation would come from outside. They taught that the entrance to the fifth world begins within. To understand this, imagine the human spirit as an instrument shaped not of wood or metal, but of breath, memory, and attention. For most of modern life, that instrument is played accidentally, struck by anxiety, pushed by distraction, tightened by fear, loosened by hope. It resonates constantly, even when we do not notice it. And like any instrument exposed to the elements, it drifts out of tune. Not suddenly, but gradually. In small deviations, a thought filled with resentment, a reaction driven by panic, a choice born from disconnection. Each deviation is minor on its own, but collectively they accumulate until the entire inner field vibrates with static. This static is what the Hopi described as spiritual noise. Not immoral, not sinful, simply incoherent. But here is the truth carried gently through their teachings. Noise can be cleared, instruments can be harmonic memory can be restored. This is where 432 Hz enters the story, not as a cosmic law, but as a tool. Not a miracle frequency that solves everything, but a gentle reminder, a tone that invites the mind and body to settle, to soften, to align. People often describe music tuned to 432 Hz as feeling familiar, grounding, peaceful, as though something inside them recognizes the sound before the ear even interprets it. These descriptions are subjective, of course. Science is cautious. Evidence is mixed, but the experiential pattern is consistent enough to be meaningful. And patterns, especially those that evoke coherence, deserve to be listened to. Consider how the body itself responds to vibration. Water, the substance that makes up most of our physical form, organizes into intricate patterns when exposed to different frequencies. Though interpretations of this phenomenon vary, the symbolism is powerful. Sound can structure chaos. It can turn randomness into form. It can remind matter of its underlying geometry. And if the body mirrors this responsiveness, then perhaps sound is not merely something we hear, but something we absorb, something that shapes the emotional and energetic landscapes of our lives. Ancient cultures understood this intuitively. Their drums were not simply instruments, they were technologies. Their chants were not entertainment, they were tuning rituals. Their temples were not static structures, they were resonant chambers designed to shape consciousness. They used sound the way a healer uses touch, gently, precisely, with the intention of restoring balance. In this sense, 432 Hz is not a modern trend. It is a rediscovery of an ancient principle. And this rediscovery matters because of the world we are stepping into. The Great Purification, as the Hopi describe it, is not about surviving storms or cosmic upheavals. It is about navigating the split between coherence and distortion. Those who resonate with truth, Humility and inner clarity rise into the fifth world not as reward, but as natural consequence. Those who cling to fear, disorder, and noise remain in the old frequency until it dissolves. The split is vibrational, not moral, which leads to the most intimate question of all. What frequency are you carrying? Not the frequency of your voice or your music, but the frequency of your inner world, the tone beneath your thoughts, the resonance behind your choices, the hum that follows you into silence. Are you aligned with the rhythm of creation, or tangled in the static of a collapsing age? To retune oneself is not dramatic, it is subtle work. It begins with stillness, the kind that lets you hear your own mind without flinching. It continues with honesty, the kind that recognizes which parts of you vibrate in distortion. It deepens through choices that cultivate coherence, speaking truth gently, acting with intention instead of impulse, listening to the earth instead of the noise of culture, allowing your emotions to move but not dominate. These acts are quieter than prophecy, but more transformative than any sign in the sky. And perhaps this is why sound holds such power in the Hopi worldview. A pure tone can cut through confusion. A steady rhythm can anchor a restless heart. A coherent vibration can remind us of who we were before the world grew loud. When people say that 432 Hz helps them feel grounded or clear-minded, they are not necessarily describing a scientific effect. They are describing a moment of resonance, a moment when the inner instrument aligns, however briefly, with a larger harmony. It is in such moments that the doorway to the fifth world opens, and now the narrative begins to soften, as though the voice of the desert winds carries the final words. Because every prophecy ends the same way, not with certainty, but with invitation. The Hopi never asked the world to fear the Great Purification. They asked it to prepare, to listen, to remember. They believed that when the world trembles, it is not dying, it is tuning. What collapses is what no longer resonates. What survives is what vibrates in truth. So the question turns toward you not as challenge, but as whisper. Do you feel the shift? In the space between your breaths? In the quiet that settles after the day's noise? In the strange sense that the world is moving toward something you cannot see yet somehow recognize? Do you hear the subtle hum beneath the chaos? The note that does not change, even as everything else does? This is the resonance the Hopi spoke of. This is the frequency that leads toward the fifth world. And as the tremors of our age grow stronger, remember this. Harmony is not found by escaping the world, but by aligning with the deeper rhythm beneath it. You do not enter the fifth world by running. You enter it by tuning slowly, gently, deliberately until your inner vibration matches the song the earth has been singing all along. The cosmos is still humming. The ancient tone is still there. And perhaps the Great Purification is nothing more than the moment humanity finally learns how to listen again.